Actually, we're now starting 12.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank everybody for coming to our press event here. I think one of the things that we've been disappointed in, those of us who are concerned about homeland security or national security, is how much or how little the crisis at the border has been covered, how much it's been ignored. And I don't think we can ignore it. I don't think it probably comes as any surprise that I would come here if I'm leading this and not have a chart. I hope there are plenty of copies of this around that we'll distribute, and we can provide it to you electronically as well. But on a macro basis, this chart really just does tell the story in pretty stark terms. You can see this is not a seasonal migration. This isn't something temporary. When we had the enormous surge in 2018, that dwarfed the humanitarian crisis, according to President Obama, in 2014. But we pretty well had that fixed. President Trump engaged in the agreements with Central America, with Mexico. He enacted policies. He was building a fence. And you can see we pretty well had gotten the unaccompanied children, people exploiting our asylum laws as family units under control until President Biden, on his first day of office, dismantled all of those successful policies. Now we have an out-of-control situation on the border. It's a significant risk to our national security, which I'm sure many of my colleagues will cover later on. In terms of the numbers, they're pretty stark. In calendar year 2021, over 2 million individuals, I love this, they changed the word on this, they were encountered. When I was chairman of Homeland Security, we called that apprehensions. But even back then, it was people were being apprehended, processed, and dispersed. Now the processing and dispersing is happening so quickly, they're just calling it encounters. But over 2 million in calendar year 2021. Known gotaways, another 344,000. So a total of 2.4 million people in 2021 came to this country illegally. About a little more than a million in return. So over 1.2 million people are in this country undocumented, illegally, and quite honestly, we really don't know where they are. 1.2 million people. And put that in perspective, that's a number that is larger than the population of 8 states. And again, we don't even know how many unknown gotaways there were. We don't know the extent of the human trafficking. Although we do know, and by the way, Senator or Vice President Harris ought to know, because she's on my committee, we had testimony that children have been sold for $84 by the human traffickers to create a family unit to exploit our asylum laws. We have no idea the extent of sex trafficking. Although I do know, having gone down and with Democratic colleagues down in Guatemala, I've seen the shelters for sex-trafficked little girls. We know they are given birth control because so many will be sexually assaulted on this dangerous journey. We have no idea the full extent of the drug trafficking. We have no idea the extent of all the gangs and gang members that are coming in here and populating and increasing the number of gangs in our inner cities. We also have no idea how many SIAs. I first heard that term by General Kelly when he was head of Southern Command, special immigrant or special interest aliens. We have heard reports of people from 100 different countries coming into this country illegally. That represents a significant threat to national security. So the bottom line is this didn't just happen. This out-of-control flow of illegal immigration, this crisis at the border, is a direct result of President Biden's policies, aided and abetted by Democrats here in Congress. We've held 3 votes on the floor of the Senate to just build the wall. It's important to recognize we are spending more not building the wall than completing it. That's a travesty. And what's really a travesty is getting control over our border was the first step. It's the necessary first step to actually fixing our immigration problem, to standing up a functioning legal immigration system, of addressing the DACA kids. You have to first secure the border so the American public has confidence that we're going to do so. So this has been a real travesty, and I'm sure we'll hear it from my colleagues as well in terms of different aspects of this. But first I'll call on Senator John Thune.
Well, thank you, Ron. Under the Biden administration, we have seen the worst border crisis in American history, and the numbers bear that out. In 2021, the illegal border crossing attempts were more than 2 million. This is a national security, and it is a humanitarian crisis. You look at just the things that are coming across the border, the fentanyl problem in and of itself. Fentanyl seizures are up 134% nationally, and in some southern border communities, it's 1,000% up in terms of fentanyl seizures. And fentanyl has now become the number one killer of Americans between the ages of 18 and 45. There are communities that are in chaos. There are border agents who are being overwhelmed, overrun, and the administration doesn't seem to care about it. The president has yet, the president of the United States, huge crisis, the president has yet to go to the border. And his borders are, the vice president has been completely missing in action. And so I hope, the president has said that after this first year, which he says is a tough year, he wants to get out of Washington, D.C. more. I hope he starts by going to the southern border, because what is happening right now is a dereliction of duty by this administration, and it needs to stop. Who's up next?
Well, the southern border is in tatters. There's no question about it. And Joe Biden does not care. Doesn't care. He hadn't been there since 2008, and that was just a drive-by. Doesn't care about the criminals, gang members, drug dealers, what's coming across the country. Basically ignored the problem ever since early on as an administration, when he sent out the signal, you come to the United States illegally, you get to stay. That's what he told the world. And then the Democrats in the Senate and the House, what do they want to do? They want to grant amnesty to those individuals. So what are the numbers? In the last 3 months, more people came to the United States illegally than in the entire year of 2020. More in 3 months than in that entire year. You've heard the numbers. 2 million illegal immigrants. And we know what works. Finish the wall. Apply the law. Get the Remain in Mexico program acting again. What happens now are people are given a piece of paper, says appear before the judge, maybe years from now. Oh, and they're using that piece of paper as identification. We have a double standard in America, one for the law-abiding citizens of this country, and the other for this incredible onslaught of illegal immigrants coming here, for which Joe Biden has turned his gaze in another direction, because he just doesn't want to see the problem that he has created and his administration is ignoring. This is a dereliction of duty on the part of the President of the United States, and that's why 2 out of 3 Americans, 2 out of 3, oppose not just his policy, but the way that he has handled the crisis at our southern border.
Of the long list of failures of the Biden administration, failure to secure our border has to be at the top of the list. And I agree with my colleagues who said he doesn't care. He just doesn't care. Meanwhile, the transnational criminal organizations that smuggle human beings into the United States, and you've already heard from Senator Johnson and others, mingled among those migrants that you might suspect are coming for economic reasons, are convicted felons, sex offenders, and people who've committed terrible crimes here in the United States or in their home country. And the president appears to be oblivious to, in addition to the humanitarian crisis and the security crisis, the public health crisis that was alluded to here a moment ago. Last year, 100,000 Americans died of drug overdoses. The fentanyl and other drugs that caused those overdose deaths, by and large, came across our southern border. So I thought, coming from a border state, maybe the president needs a place to start. That's why I reached out to Senator Sinema, another border state senator, a Democrat, my colleague Henry Cuellar from Laredo, a Democrat, and Tony Gonzalez, a Republican from a border district, and we came up with the Bipartisan Border Solutions Act. Not a panacea, but a place to start. The Biden administration has shown zero interest in that or any other solution. And as you've seen, Secretary Mayorkas, who's been down to the border recently, he's had Border Patrol agents turn their back on him because basically he is not allowing them to do their job. It's a travesty. I wish there was something we could do or say that would change their conduct of the Biden administration. The only thing I can think of is the American people can rise up in these midterm elections coming up and give Republicans the majority in the House and the Senate so we can put legislation, meaningful legislation, on the president's desk.
Thank you, Senator Johnson, for doing this. It is Groundhog Day, and I was here in October with many of us when we had a press conference in the press room in the Capitol talking about this very issue. And basically the bottom line was, do something. So here we are again, more press conferences, more statistics, more outrage at the situation at the southern border. So I'm the ranking member on the Homeland Security Appropriations Committee. That means we're looking at the dollars and the numbers very, very closely every single month. In December, nearly a month after the December statistics were complete, finally the administration has released them. And we kept saying, what's taking so long? Why? Why? Because the numbers have just gone up and up. This number of December of 179,000 is 242% higher than the previous year of December 2020. So these numbers are staggering, and the lack of information about these numbers is very disappointing and makes you know that they know the effect these numbers will have on American citizens, and they want to try to bury them within the news cycle how best they can. But there are other costs. We talk about human costs. We talk about the cost to our communities, and certainly Senator Cornyn, being from Texas, could really tell us a lot about that. But again, this is costing us last year about $1 billion. I'm going to outline these quickly. $335 million for housing, $160 million for medical care. This is just in Homeland Security. Health and Human Services has an even larger budget on health. $90 million on hotels and processing, $70 million for overtime for personnel at the border, and another $60 million for shuttling migrants from one facility to the next. The drug issue hits my state particularly hard. We have the largest percentage of overdose deaths from fentanyl in the entire country, and the fact that CBP has picked up over hundreds percentages of more fentanyl coming across the border. I asked a question. I talked to the head of the Border Patrol yesterday, and I asked him, is this because we're getting better at detecting it, or is it because they know our eyes off the ball and they're flooding it with more and more product coming into the country? His answer was both. Well, that's disappointing to me, because we've been screaming about this devastating effect that these drugs are having on our families, our communities, our economies, and our health facilities at the same time. It's just terribly, terribly difficult to see what the drugs, how they're ravaging our communities. So lastly, I would say, Mr. President, it's February of 2022. You've been in office now over a year. Your yearly statistics is more than any other year in the history of immigration. Over 2 million people. Do something. Not just act like you care, which he doesn't do a very good job of that. Actually do something. Work with us to make this problem better, to make this problem, the numbers shrink, and to make this open border policy that you've moved forward on a thing of the past. Thank you.
Senator Scott.
So in November, I took an additional trip to the border. I went down to the Yuma area, and you just don't get it. If you go talk to the Border Patrol agents, the first thing they'll tell you is they've been there through a variety of presidents, and every president tried to do something except for this one. They said this president tries nothing. They have no interest in trying to secure the border. Every time I've been down there, what you see is steel just sitting around. Where I went in Yuma, the way it works down there is the immigrants would fly into Mexico City, take a flight to, I think, Mexicali is the closest city, take a bus or an Uber right to the border, and just walk across. Border Patrol would watch when they're coming. They would have a van. They would pick them up. And the expectation would be they would be somewhere around the United States within 2 days. You can't make this stuff up. Why would you do this? So we all know the numbers. I mean, 2 million people have been apprehended. 100,000 people have died of drug overdose. Now, let's put that in perspective. I think 2 weeks ago I talked to an individual in Florida, a mom. Her 21-year-old son came back from the service to surprise her for her birthday. Went out that night with some friends. The friend her son said he was nervous about something, gave him a Xanax, in 5 minutes he was dead. A Xanax had been bought over the internet, had Chinese fentanyl in it. Like that, her son's gone. There's stories like that all over the United States. And why the Democrats and why the president doesn't care about 100,000 people of dying of drug overdose is beyond me. Why the president doesn't care to comply with the law. Why he doesn't care, he turns his back on Border Patrol. And then he takes our hard-earned dollars that are paid for by somebody having a job or a business trying to make a profit. He takes those dollars and pays for illegal immigrants to fly all over this country. This makes no sense at all. And then in Mayorkas, he comes to committee, comes to Homeland Security, and he says, oh, the border's secure. That is a complete lie. What I tell people when I go back home is, do not trust information coming out of the federal government. First off, I bet even this, as bad as these numbers are, the Biden administration tries to massage it. And then they come and lie to us in committee. The president needs to show up and start doing his job.
Senator Moran.
Thank you, Ron. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. The border, if there's a border plan from this administration, I don't know what it is. If there's a border plan, I can't see that anything is being implemented that is making the difference necessary to protect the well-being of Americans. There's a tremendous increase in crime in the United States. People are insecure in their communities and their homes. So much of the border efforts will determine whether or not we're able to get a handle on increasing crime in this country. My most recent trip to the border, indications were that we are failing time and time again to intercept fentanyl, drugs, human trafficking, all which creates challenges on the border, but which creates challenges at home in Kansas as a result of the laws that are then broken by folks who make their way across the United States. I would add an additional thing. My conversations with federal law enforcement agencies. The Chinese are capable of crossing our border with the assistance of the Mexican cartels to do things that are very damaging to our national security, to our defense posture, and to our economic security. Time and time again, the Chinese are able to cross the border from Mexico to the United States for purposes of destroying our economy by stealing our secrets. What happens on our borders has a huge consequence to Kansans, the safety and security in their homes and communities, and whether or not our nation is able to defend itself from adversaries like China. Thank you.
Senator Langford.
Vice President would not go and have not gone. Here are the things that I saw firsthand. And I would encourage any reporter to go check my facts on it and to go look and see on it. What I saw firsthand was a large-scale facility that they have set up for the MPP, the Remain in Mexico program. They're doing that because the federal courts have ordered them to reinstate that policy. That building is empty. So far that they had evaluated 60 people that might be eligible for it, but as they went through the review process, they excused 57 of those and only were running 3 people through it. 3. That was last week in Brownsville, Texas. I'd encourage anyone to go look at that facility. The federal taxpayers are paying millions of dollars for a decorative item so the Biden administration can tell the courts we're implementing MPP but not actually doing it. I'd encourage you to go back and look at the wall, because the Biden administration is saying we're closing the gaps. We're closing the gaps. There are gaps in the wall. We know it's nonsensical. We're closing the gaps. I'd encourage anyone to actually go see what's happening, because you'll see generations of 30-foot wall that's there with a gap in between, and they're closing the gap with a fence about this tall. And that's they're closing the gap in between. That's what's actually going on at the border. So don't believe actually the numbers and the statistics and things that are coming out. Go see it for yourself and know. And go talk to the Border Patrol agents, which will tell you every single person crossing the border pays between $4,000 and $30,000 per person to actually cross that border that they pay to the cartels. The Biden administration has been the greatest profit maker for the Mexican cartels that we've ever seen, in their ability to be able to move humans and smuggling and to move drugs across our border. I believe the vast majority of the people do not agree with the Biden plan that he's executing right now for the border. I believe the vast majority of the American people want to see a secure border, by the way, like every other nation in the world wants to see. Everyone wants to be able to see a secure border. We are no different on that, and we look for the Biden administration to actually have a plan to secure the border rather than running their current plan to leave an unsecure border.
Senator Ron.
So it was roughly a year ago when many of us here, I think there were 18 Republican senators that were down on the border. I'm going to give you, you've heard a lot of stats. I mean, they speak for themselves. What I remember is we got there a little before midnight. You get down to the river, and I was with one of the Border Patrol men, and all of a sudden you hear heckling coming from across the Rio Grande. So the system is so gamed then, and I asked, well, what are they saying? Well, we're going to keep coming, and I think they referenced Biden at the time as well. That's a sad story. I remember we took a trip up the Rio Grande, and on our way back, there was commotion on the other side of the river. I said, what is going on there? Well, that's a floater. That was someone with all the stuff that was going on that tried to attempt a crossing and didn't make it. Mentioned earlier, other folks coming across the border, other nationalities. In the Del Rio district, the most shocking stat was that 54 different nationalities had crossed the border. You heard Senator Lankford talking about $4,000 up to $25,000. We've created a growth business among smugglers and coyotes. And the pitiful thing about all of this is it was working as good as it ever was with the wall and with the stay in Mexico policy. The Border Patrol told us that. And sadly, when your main reason for putting this kind of terrible results into place was that it was the opposite of what was working, that's the worst of politics in this place. The Border Patrol said it was working. You get a new administration in there that tries to undo everything simply because it was the other party. It was Trump doing something that was working. They come and dismantle all of it. A travesty at the border.
Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you, and thank you for being here today. And I was one of the senators that was on the trip that Senator Braun is referring to down there at midnight, and literally coming in contact and could hear the drug cartels down there, and watching the floating body of a very young person that didn't make it across. It is incredible that we are continuing to have press conferences to bring this to the attention of the President of the United States. There is a major crisis going on at the border. And to think 2 million people have already come across that border illegally, and the drug issues that are being compounded, as you've heard about already, and the crimes that are being committed. And to see those young girls in the night in those woods with people that we're sure they did not even know who they were. This is, it is beyond a cause for alarm, but it is truly a direct result of President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris doing nothing about this at all. They are feeding into this crisis. They stopped the border wall. They have totally undercut the border agents, and they refuse to go down there. I'm with Senator Langford. It has to be by design that this is purposely created. And to think of all the illegals that are coming to the interior of the country, like states like Mississippi, like my state, and every other state, we don't know who they are. We don't know where they are. We don't know what they're doing. That's the reason we're here today. We have got to continue to demand that action is taken, that the Wall Act would begin the wall's construction again, the bill that we're all supporting, and to reinforce the law enforcement down there that are simply trying to do their jobs of enforcing the law. It is a crisis of President Biden's own making, and we can fix it. It's proven that we can fix it. We can curb it immensely, but we've got to continue to do that. We must fix this for the sake of the American people. Thank you.
Senator Kennedy, last but not least.
Okay. Well, I want to take a little bit of a different approach. I think it would be fair to say that if you have a pulse and a marginal desire for a better life, you understand that we have a problem at the border. And the American people don't like it. The American people don't completely understand it. The American people don't understand why a Nigerian doctor or a German machinist has to be vetted for years. But if you can jump the fence at the southern border, you're welcome. That makes no sense to them. And I think as a result, many Americans, perhaps even most of Americans, have concluded that this is purposeful. Many Americans, by some polls, most Americans have concluded that President Biden believes in open borders. And many Americans also believe that the members of the Biden administration who are making immigration policy believe that vetting people at the border is racist. And all of that, in part, in my judgment, is why President Biden's poll numbers have been on a journey to the center of the earth. I think President Biden has misread the American people. The American people do not hate immigration. They support legal immigration. The American people don't think vetting people at the border is racist. They think it's prudent. I read a column, I don't know, 6-8 months ago, maybe a year ago. I think this analogy in this column, I don't remember who wrote it, it's very appropriate. Most Americans look at our southern border as America's front door. And they look at the southern border like they look at their own front door. Most Americans lock their front door at night. They don't lock their front door at night because they hate everybody on the outside. They lock their front door at night because they love the people on the inside. And they want to know who's coming in and who's going out of their home. They see it as a rule of law and a safety issue. And if I could offer any advice to the Biden administration, I would respectfully suggest that they adopt the view of most Americans.
Thanks, Senator Kennedy. Just to reinforce a couple of points, I encourage all of you to take this graph. I mean, it shows the macro impact, but it also shows the cause and effect of all these policies. Again, this didn't just happen. This is the policy. When we talked about the depredations of the illegal flow, the human trafficking, the sex trafficking, the drug trafficking, understand that President Biden's policies are facilitating the business model of some of the most evil people on the planet. It's incredibly important to understand what's happening and what the impact is of the policies. And finally, just to put in one more perspective on here, combined with the known gotaways, we're talking about, on an average, 6,500 people per day for the entire year cross this country illegally. That's a large caravan every day. It's completely overwhelmed Customs and Border Patrol, which is why they've turned their back on this administration, Secretary Mayorkas, because this administration has turned their back on law enforcement. With that, we'll take some questions.
Concerning a different crisis right now, the Biden administration is deploying 3,000 troops to Eastern Europe. What are your views on that? And what are you hoping to hear from officials tomorrow in your classified briefing?
Well, from my standpoint, I agree with Ronald Reagan, you achieve peace through strength. And when we talk about strength, we're talking first economic strength and then military strength to deter your enemies. Unfortunately, starting with the crisis at the border, the first day in office, the actions, the policies of this administration have weakened America economically, internationally. The embarrassing and dangerous surrender in Afghanistan, we just came from a briefing there. It's noticed by our enemies. So our enemies perceive the weakness and they take the opportunity to act. I don't think you would see Putin surround Ukraine were it not for the weakness of this administration. I don't think you'd see China with overflights over Taiwan, or Iran more active in Yemen, or North Korea testing these weapons. So we are highly concerned about what's happening in Ukraine, but you need to deal with that through strength, through actions from, like we did in the previous administration. You didn't see Putin move during the previous administration where we were strengthening our military, where we were strengthening our nation. They're only moving in reaction to weakness. Anybody else want to? Okay. Pardon? I think it's. I don't want to provide any comfort to Putin. I don't even want to answer that question, sir.
The crisis at the border. Democrats have criticized Republicans that you're against immigration reform, but yet the American people, are you against immigration reform? You want to let them know that, but then also at the same time, you got to take care of this border crisis first, correct?
No, absolutely. And I was working with the previous administration on what I thought would have been an excellent immigration reform. We were taking like 100 different visas, shrinking down to about 6, with a metric system tied to economic activity. The legal immigration that benefits America, that doesn't exploit the people coming into this country illegally. So absolutely I want to fix it, and that's what's such a travesty about this. We were so close, right here. We'd pretty well almost gotten rid of the flow of unaccompanied children, families exploiting our laws. We still have, single individuals coming because every Democrat presidential candidate was saying, we're not going to deport anybody, we're going to give free health care. So even during the presidential debate, Democrats were encouraging what we now see. But what I made in my opening remarks is you need to secure the border as the first step. The American public will not support immigration reform unless they're confident that we actually secure the border. We learned that under Ronald Reagan cut a deal. Amnesty for border security. Got the amnesty, never got the border security, and that continues to this day. So that is the first step, and that's such a tragedy. We were so close to completing that first step so we could move forward with a functioning legal immigration system that will benefit America. I wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. We're going to need workers, but it has to be a legal process.
If I could just quickly go back to Ukraine. Senator Ron, you put out a pretty strong statement moments ago saying that you were opposed to the 3,000 troops and President Biden sending them to Eastern Europe. Can you explain your position on that? Why are you opposed?
I'm opposed because you're doing all this right when you're at the last minute. And when you project weakness as basically the main thing you've done, not only on the border, the way we left Afghanistan, bad actors see that. Putin thrives on it. So when you're doing things like talking about troops, the long-term thing that President Trump tried to project is be strong. When you cross a red line, make sure you pay for it, but don't get involved in these endless wars. When you do what Biden has done, you're inviting the opposite of all of what I just mentioned. And we're in the midst of it. You can't fix these things once you give all the advantages to the biggest mischief maker in the world. And he's going to prosper from this regardless of the outcome. So that's why I was against that. Too little, too late. It also gets you embroiled in something where you should have had more strength and prevention, not get caught in the swirl of the moment.
What should President Biden do right now?
Sadly, you're limited to few options. I mean, and Putin has all of them. And then, of course, we'll have to hit him hard. There's no doubt about it. He wants to reconstitute the Soviet Union. And he's going to do anything he can at any point in time. They're a relatively small economy that punches way above their weight, look like they're behaving like the Soviet Union did before Ronald Reagan put no-nonsense approaches out there where there were sanctions over a long period of time. You cannot fix this kind of result or behavior when you're caught up in the moment of it.
Anything else?
Yeah,
Sir.
Yeah, back to the immigration. Can we see this as a first step into extending a hand from Republicans to the Biden administration into working into something tangible to fix the immigration system? You mentioned the polls about the declining numbers for President Biden. Also, some polls are showing that Americans are really tired from the infighting between the two parties without anything tangible on all the issues that really touch their own lives on a daily basis, especially immigration.
Well, again, I'll point back to that moment in time. After the previous administration pretty well solved the problem, that was a time where we could have had a cooperative bipartisan agreement to stand up a functioning legal immigration system. That was all blown up. I mean, we have set ourselves back so far in terms of being able to address and stand up a legal immigration system. That's what's such a shame about what President Biden and his administration has done. But, listen, good bipartisan step. How about we finish building the wall that we've already paid for? I mean, it's cost the American taxpayer more money not to build the wall than to have completed it. And that just leaves us open for all the problems associated with the illegal flow of the crisis. Okay, thank you very much.
Good job. Good job and good chart. Love the chart.